By no means am I here to tell you how to be a parent, because I am clearly not suited to tell you how to be a parent. Because, surprise, surprise, I don't have kids, and I certainly don't have kids today in ninth grade. But what I do feel that I have to offer is just some insight into what the modern look of what social media looks like and some of the dangers that are out there. Because I use them, probably not as much as your children, but probably pretty close. And so just some things to consider, some things I've stolen from other people that I've heard talk on similar topics, and some things that are of my own. But the first couple are just kind of about awareness, because I think it's something that has commonly become less of a consideration because social media and internet usage has become such an integral part of our children's lives and of my generation's life. And so I don't know, many of you I'm sure are very aware of what your children are gaining access to. Many of you are keeping track of what they're gaining access to, but it's just a consideration. Do you know what social media that you're using and what it means? There are things even as a 23-year-old that pop up that I have to catch up with because I haven't heard about it yet. When someone in youth groups talks about this cool app that just came out, I've got no idea what it is, and so I just put on a friendly face and act like I know what it is because I have to be cool and up to date, but then I have to Google it and find out what's going on. But, what are they using and what sort of access do they have through that? And some of that is outlined further down. And then do you have access to their accounts? They're not 18, you have the right to do it. It's up to you if that's something you want to do. I know that when I was in high school, Facebook was kind of reaching its popularity. It's certainly come down in popularity more recently. But when I got Facebook, my parents' rule was, I'd get a Facebook, but if I got Facebook, I had to be friends with them. So that anything I posted, they could see. They didn't have to have my password or anything like that. Just go on this one. But they had access to see, anything I posted showed up on their wall. Anything that my friends were sending me, they could see, with the exception of private messaging, which is again something we'll talk about further down. And then a big thing that is something I'm stealing from a prominent priest from the Duluth Diocese, Father Mike Schmitz, is the use of the internet controlled in any way? Especially with smartphones now. They have access to the internet 24/7, whether you're around or not, whether anybody's keeping track of it or not. And like I said, when the whole group was here, we have access to the world, and a lot of that world has potential dangers. Are we keeping track of that? Do we have those filters of the 17+ filter? Do we have? Are we checking histories? Do our youth have a personal computer in their bedroom? If so, why? It's access to lots of dangers. Do they keep their phone in their room at night? When they're sleeping? If so, why? If it's an alarm, you can get one for like $10 at Walmart. But again, that's something that you have to decide. Just something that I want to bring up as a consideration. Let's see here. And then another big one too is, what are they sharing on their profiles, whether it's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, any of that, and are you okay with that? Most of these things have that basic profile that's shared, and a lot of that information is available to people who may or may not, be friends or followers or whatever. Things like, their full name. I know plenty of people, even people my age, that don't include their last name on their stuff just because they don't want it to be there. They want to have more of a separation. Their address. I think that's oftentimes considered one of those things that doesn't need to be considered, but something that oftentimes youth don't think about. Phone numbers, even a profile picture. oversharing happens the most often. And profile pictures, you can make it so it's not available to everybody. So people can't see any of your pictures, even your profile picture, until they friend you. Is that something you want to do? I don't know. It's up to you. And then birthday in school as well, things to consider. And then, along with that, is your child's profile on a private setting for anyone that your child has not granted access to. The idea of, if that person hasn't friended them or chosen to follow them, can they see all that information? Oftentimes, people don't think about it. Often, especially younger people, don't consider that. And then the big one is, do they really know everybody that is following them or that they're friends with? Your friends. Because I think, that's a popular thing. I don't know how many people are following you is a big kind of competitive mentality, but it's also a potentially dangerous one. So just, again, things to consider. Does anybody have any questions about those things? And to be fair, this is the first time I've had to do a PCYI presentation. So you all might know this from the back of your hand. I know many of you have been coming here for years. And so I'm doing my best to make sure that I'm providing you with the information that I'm able to. So if it's kind of repetitive, I apologize. But I have done it before, so just be happy we're not using those real lame videos we've done before. So hopefully I'm more exciting. If I'm not, please don't tell me. And then lower on the page, I just included kind of an outline of what some of these apps and popular social media opportunities are, what they're about, and in some cases, what are some of the potential dangers. But like I said previously, Facebook, in my opinion, is most likely to be overshared. Things, include too much personal information, even in just their basic profile, that many people have access to without having to actually be a friend or having followed. And a great way to find that out is if you don't have Facebook, or if you do, sign out of it and then search your kid's name, find their profile, and go into it without being logged into Facebook. It's the best way to find out whether or not what they're sharing is available to anybody. And for myself, I do that occasionally with my own profile to see what people can see online without being friends, just to keep tabs on whether or not it's available to the public. Because sometimes settings change on their own. And sometimes it just things slip through the cracks. Then Instagram, many of you I'm sure are aware of what Instagram is. I think it's probably one of the more tame things. You share pictures with people who follow you. There is private messaging, so something to keep in mind. But for the most part, relatively harmless, in my opinion. And then Twitter, another one that people can potentially overshare because it's become popular to kind of share your every single thought with everyone. But for the most part, again, relatively harmless for the most part. As long as there's reason involved. Again, private messaging, but many of these things have that. And then the other big two, or the last kind of the big one, is Snapchat. I don't know that there's a kid in the room with the large group that doesn't have Snapchat if they have a smartphone. And Snapchat can be a lot of fun. I have Snapchat, but there's a lot of potential danger there in that the mentality that the picture goes away after 10 seconds, which became very clear that was not the case shortly after the app came out. And it's just something that I think many of our youth need to be aware of, and kind of that mentality. Because it's ultimately just a picture texting app. If they can text, then Snapchat is relatively harmless. as long as they're using reason. But of course, as we know, 8th and 9th graders aren't necessarily always the best with reason. So those are kind of the big, what's that, big 5? If I can count, big 4. And then the rest are probably less popular, but still certainly popular. Vine, I know, is, I think a lot of kids in this age group are on Vine viewing things, maybe not necessarily posting things, but basically what it is you create a 6-second video that can be shared with people that follow you. Again, relatively harmless, except for that the app is not good about filtering inappropriate videos from audiences that don't want to see that sort of stuff. I had Vine for a short time, and it became very clear that there was a decent amount of inappropriate content. That was a large portion of the reason I got rid of it. So, Pinterest, I think, probably is the least concern of the entire list. I don't do much with it. Surprise, surprise. Basically, you can share interests with others by posting them on boards and that sort of thing. Very little personal information. I think you can private message, but I don't know that it's a particularly high or particularly popular aspect of it. And then YouTube. I think YouTube is much better than finding out, filtering out those inappropriate things. And of course, the benefit of YouTube is you can get access without having to have a personal account, unless you're posting things, which again, I don't think many of our youth that are their age are posting things to YouTube. There might be a few, but relatively harmless, in my opinion. Are there any questions about kind of those first 7? 6, 7? Are you guys pretty well aware of those 7? I just want to kind of gauge the room of what the understanding is. Okay, so we're on a pretty good field here then, actually. All right, so if I talk too much about those first 7, I apologize. And then we get into some of the more obscure ones as we go down, but based on everything I've seen and based on some of the research I did leading up to this, it's clear that they kind of round out the most popular things. Kick, I think, might be the most, or potentially the most dangerous thing on the list, because it was created to be kind of a texting alternative, but now they've created many opportunities to interact with other people that they may not know through games and other apps inside of the app. So it's not one that I've used much, but everything I've seen from it, I think there's a lot of gateways for potential dangers. Tumblr, it's a blogging thing, really. Again, a lot of inappropriate content, oftentimes. But personal information is kind of limited, so there is that. So, last couple. Yik Yak is one first, the name is stupid. Sorry to break this, but you can privately share with people in your vicinity. I think the biggest positive of this is that there is no personal information involved. However, I think that could also be a temptation to overshare because of that. And then Whisper, very similar to that. If you share with us a particular vicinity around you, but the greater danger with Whisper is you can interact with those people when you're doing the so those are just kind of my thoughts on those as a 23-year-old guy who sees a lot of what our youth are doing on social media. I have the benefit and pain of operating parish social media, so I see a lot of them, what they're doing and that sort of thing. If they've chosen to do some of that, and for the most part, I think our kids do pretty well. However, I think in certain cases there are dangers. I think the parish social media is a great example of the idea that it's not very commonly considered that if you follow a major business or something like that, that people have access to your information. Just because you're following a business doesn't mean that they don't have access to your information. There's somebody behind that business